3 heartbeats, that's how long it took for the Shadow Riders to realize they'd made a fatal mistake. The quiet rancher's wife they'd snatched from Wilson's Creek wasn't just another helpless homesteader. She was Sarah "Swift-Hand" McKenzie, the legendary gunslinger who'd brought down the notorious Bishop gang before disappearing into the quiet life. But what made their blood run cold wasn't her reputation. It was discovering that their entire operation, their smuggling routes, their weapons caches, their whole criminal empire. She'd been watching it all when their leader Snake Eye Martinez dragged her off her horse that morning. He didn't just start a fight. He exposed a secret that would bring the entire Shadow Riders gang crashing down before we jump back in. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted long shadows across the dusty streets of Wilson's Creek as Sarah McKenzie guided her horse toward Thompson's general store, her keen eyes scanning the quiet town, noting every detail. Mrs. Henderson sweeping her porch, young Billy Walker delivering newspapers, and old Jim Curtis unlocking his blacksmith shop. After 15 years of tracking the West's most dangerous outlaws, situational awareness had become as natural as breathing, the familiar scent of fresh bread wafted from Mary's bakery, mixing with the crisp autumn air. Sarah adjusted her riding skirt, carefully arranged to conceal the custom, Colt strapped to her thigh. The weapon was masterfully modified, but like its owner it held secrets, reinforced mechanisms, specialized grips, and a hair trigger that could spell the difference between life and death, all carefully disguised as simple embellishments. Mary stepped out of her bakery, a fresh loaf already wrapped in paper. "Morning, Sarah, warm from the oven, just how you like it. You're a blessing." Sarah accepted the bread, noting how Mary's eyes darted to the unusual number of horses tied up at the far end of the street. She'd been in Wilson's Creek long enough to know when something felt off. New faces in town. Mary said quietly, "Rode in late last night, made quite a scene at Patterson's saloon." Sarah nodded, taking a careful bite of the warm bread. The Shadow Riders had been pushing their territory north, establishing footholds in small towns across the territory. Their arrival in Wilson's Creek wasn't unexpected. She'd been tracking their movements for months. What they didn't know was that every town they'd visited had been carefully chosen, each location, part of a larger investigation that Sarah had been building with the territorial marshals. The bell above Thompson's general store chimed as Sarah entered, the familiar smell of coffee and leather goods greeting her. Thomas Thompson looked up from his ledger, his weathered face creasing into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sarah Tom nodded, glancing toward the back room. "Got those special orders you were asking about?" Special orders. They're code for information about unusual purchases, particularly ammunition and supplies that might connect to the Shadow Riders' gun-running operation. Tom had been Sarah's eyes and ears in the community for months, keeping track of suspicious transactions that might link to the gang's weapon smuggling network. The thunder of hooves grew louder outside. Sarah positioned herself near the counter, angling her body to maintain clear sight lines to both the entrance and the back door. Years of gunfighting had taught her to always know her exits. The door burst open, bell jangling violently, as 5 members of the Shadow Riders strode in, their leader. Snake Eye Martinez stood a head taller than the others, his black duster decorated with rattlesnake skin and silver conchos that told stories of territory claimed and rivals eliminated. His lieutenant spread out Rattler near the tools section, Viper by the ammunition display, Scorpion blocking the main aisle, and Cobra lingering near the door. Well, Snake Eye's voice carried the artificial confidence of someone used to being feared. "Looks like the general store's got some fine company this morning." Sarah kept her expression neutral, years of undercover work helping her maintain her facade as a simple rancher's wife. She noted their positions, their subtle glances towards certain supplies, the way Cobra's eyes lingered on the ammunition cases. Each detail confirmed what she'd suspected about their operation. "Can I help you gentlemen find anything?" Tom's voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the tension underneath. Snake Eye ignored him, focusing instead on Sarah. "Ain't this touching town's got itself a proper lady doing the morning shopping, bet? You got a real nice spread somewhere, don't you, darling?" Sarah adjusted her skirts, using the motion to mask her assessment of their weapons. Snake Eye's custom revolver poorly concealed, Rattler's knife visible in his boot, Scorpion's brass knuckles glinting in his back pocket. "Just a small ranch," she replied quietly, tending to my husband's affairs while he's away. Snake Eye moved closer, deliberately invading her space. You know what? I can't figure out how a pretty thing like you ends up in a town like this, right? When we're moving in, almost like someone's keeping an eye on things. The tension in the room shifted. This wasn't just random harassment. They'd noticed something, perhaps picked up on surveillance they thought they'd spotted. Sarah's mind raced through contingencies. Her cover was deep, but if they'd connected any dots. Just doing my shopping, Sarah said, but Snake Eye's hand was already moving toward her arm. Don't much believe in coincidence, sweetheart. Think maybe you need to come along with us. Have a friendly chat about what you might have seen around town. The next few seconds happened in slow motion as Snake Eye grabbed her arm. Years of instinct took over. Sarah's right hand dropped to her skirt, ready to draw, but she forced herself to hesitate. Kept the legendary swift hand McKenzie hidden behind the mask of a frightened rancher's wife, because sometimes the best way to gather intelligence was to let your enemies think they had the upper hand, even if it meant becoming their prisoner for a while. Sarah felt the coarse rope bite into her wrists as Scorpion bound them behind her back, his knots betraying a military precision that confirmed her suspicions about the Shadow Rider's recent recruitment of former cavalry soldiers through the dusty window of Thompson's store. She watched Snake Eye Martinez issue orders to his men, their movements suggesting a well-planned operation rather than a spontaneous kidnapping. The familiar weight of her hidden Colt pressed against her thigh. Undiscovered thanks to years of practice in concealing weapons, Thompson stood frozen behind his counter, his face a mask of carefully constructed fear that Sarah recognized as the shopkeeper, maintained their shared cover outside. Mary watched from her bakery doorway, her hands trembling as she clutched her apron, but Sarah caught the subtle nod that meant the baker had already sent young Billy Walker racing toward the marshal's office with news of the kidnapping. The Shadow Riders didn't realize that every witness to their crime was part of a carefully cultivated network of informants that Sarah had built over the past year. The autumn wind carried the scent of sage and gunpowder as Snake Eye's men led Sarah to their horses. The town of Wilson's Creek seemed to hold its breath, the usual morning bustle replaced by a tense silence that spoke volumes about the Shadow Rider's reputation. Sarah took in every detail: the way Rattler favored his left leg, indicating a recent injury, how Viper's saddlebags bulged with what she suspected were documents about their weapons pipeline, the manner in which Cobra constantly scanned the rooftops, betraying their fear of rival gangs. "Get her on my horse," Snake Eye ordered, his voice carrying the edge of someone used to immediate obedience. Sarah allowed herself to be lifted onto the stallion, noting how the beast's expensive tack and custom modifications suggested serious money behind the Shadow Rider's operation, more than simple outlaws could acquire through typical raids and robberies before mounting behind her. Snake Eye leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "You picked the wrong time to play spy, little lady." Sarah kept her expression fearful, but her mind was already mapping the direction they were likely to take based on the gang's known hideouts and supply routes. The thunder of hooves echoed off the weathered buildings as the Shadow Riders rode out of Wilson's Creek. Sarah watched the town recede, maintaining her facade of a frightened rancher's wife while memorizing every turn, every landmark they passed. The gang rode hard, pushing their horses at a pace that told her they had a specific destination in mind, rather than simply trying to lose any pursuit. The terrain grew rougher as they headed into the foothills of the Broken Spine Mountains, territory that Sarah knew well from her days tracking the Bishop gang. Snake Eye kept one arm wrapped around Sarah's waist, his grip unnecessarily tight, a display of dominance that revealed more about his insecurities than he realized. "You've got a good seat for a rancher's wife," he commented, as they navigated a particularly treacherous stretch of trail. "Most ladies I know don't ride like they were born to it." Sarah allowed a tremor to enter her voice. "Just do what needs doing to help my husband." She noticed how Rattler and Viper exchanged glances at her response, their suspicion suggesting they'd done more research into her background than she'd initially suspected. The sun climbed higher as they rode deeper into the mountains, the air growing thinner and the shadows longer. Sarah recognized landmarks that confirmed they were heading toward an old silver mine she'd marked on her map months ago, when tracking unusual supply movements in the area the Shadow Riders had chosen their base, while the abandoned mine offering multiple escape routes and natural storage for their weapons cache, as well as a defensible position against both law enforcement and rival gangs. "Ain't no husband coming for you." Snake Eye's voice carried a cruel amusement that sent his men chuckling. "Checked up on that story of yours. Seems mighty convenient how you showed up in Wilson's Creek, right when old man Peterson's ranch came up for sale." Sarah kept her body tense with pretend fear, while her mind calculated angles and distances, memorizing the path they were taking, and noting defensive positions that might prove useful later. The gang wasn't just moving her, they were shepherding her toward something specific. Their formation too precise for a simple kidnapping. A raven's harsh cry echoed across the rocks, drawing Sarah's attention to a flash of movement on a distant ridge, a glint of sunlight on metal that most would have missed, but her trained eyes recognized as a signal mirror. The territorial marshals were already tracking them, just as she'd planned when setting up this operation months ago. Snake Eye might think he was in control, but Sarah Swift-Hand McKenzie had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to infiltrate a criminal empire was to let them think they'd captured you. The abandoned mine came into view, its weathered timbers and rusted equipment, telling stories of wealth long gone, but Sarah noted fresh wagon tracks in the dust, proof that the Shadow Riders were using the site regularly. The gang's hideout was larger than intelligence had suggested. Multiple buildings carefully positioned to control the approaches, and several well-hidden sentry positions that spoke of professional military planning. This wasn't just a temporary camp. It was a fortress, one that Sarah had just been invited into, albeit not in the way its occupants intended. "Bring her inside." Snake Eye dismounted, dragging Sarah from the horse with calculated roughness. "Time to find out exactly what she knows about our operation and who she's been talking to." Sarah stumbled convincingly as they led her toward the mine's entrance, her eyes taking in every detail while maintaining her mask of fear, because sometimes the best way to discover an enemy's secrets was to let them think they were the ones doing the interrogating, when in reality, they were revealing exactly what she'd come to learn. The mine's entrance gaped like a hungry mouth as the Shadow Riders led Sarah inside, the air growing thick with the scent of old timber and fresh gunpowder. Her eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light, noting how the gang had transformed the abandoned shaft into a sophisticated operation. Reinforced support beams housed oil lamps at regular intervals, while side tunnels had been widened to accommodate wagon traffic. She counted 3 major intersections, each offering potential escape routes and suggesting the complex extended far deeper than territorial marshal intelligence had indicated. Snake Eye shoved her into what had once been the mine office, now converted into an interrogation room. The walls still bore the faded markings of silver assay results, but new additions caught Sarah's attention. A heavy wooden chair bolted to the floor, maps of territory, marking what she suspected were smuggling routes, and most importantly, a logbook partially visible beneath fresh wanted posters. Her own likeness conspicuously absent from the collection. "Make her comfortable," Snake Eye ordered, as Scorpion moved to secure her to the chair. The rope work was professional, Sarah noted as Scorpion bound her to the chair, his knots designed to tighten if she struggled, another sign of military training that confirmed her suspicions about the Shadow Riders' recent recruitment patterns. Through the open door, she caught glimpses of their operation men moving crates, marked as mining supplies, that clinked with the unmistakable sound of weapons being transported. She counted 8 new faces, not part of the original gang membership, that suggested their operation was growing faster than anyone had realized. Well, now Snake Eye pulled up a chair, straddling it backwards as he faced her. "Time to have that friendly chat about what you've been seeing around Wilson's Creek." Sarah allowed her lip to tremble, maintaining her frightened rancher's wife facade, while her trained eyes caught every detail of the room's layout. "I don't know anything." "Please," she whispered. "I just do the shopping, handle the ranch while my husband's away." Snake Eye's laugh was cold as winter steel. "Funny thing about that husband of yours," he reached into his duster, producing a folded paper. "Sent some boys to check out your spread." He unfolded the paper, revealing a hand-drawn map of her property. Nice little ranch, but awful light on cattle for a cattle ranch especially. Strange how you always seem to be in town. When important shipments are moving through, Sarah's mind raced, calculating possibilities. They'd investigated her background more thoroughly than expected. But she noticed how Snake Eye's questions focused on recent activities. He hadn't connected her to Swift-Hand. McKenzie hadn't discovered her true identity, which meant she could still control how much they learned. Movement in the tunnel outside caught her attention. new arrivals' boots with a distinctive silver spurs that rang against the stone floor. Sarah recognized that sound had heard it 3 months ago during a weapons sale in Copper Creek that had gone bad when territorial marshals had tried to intervene. The Shadow Riders weren't just growing, they were forming alliances. The heavy tread of multiple boots approached the office as Snake Eye's smile grew colder. Got some friends real interested in meeting our mystery woman. The door swung wide, admitting 3 men whose presence made Sarah's blood run cold, though she maintained her fearful expression. Iron Jack Thompson, former cavalry officer turned arms dealer, Marcus the Ghost Reeves, whose specialty was making problems disappear, and most surprisingly, Colonel James Blackwood, officially dead after being court-martialed for selling military weapons to outlaws. Their arrival confirmed her worst fears. The Shadow Riders weren't just ambitious, they were being groomed, transformed from common outlaws into something far more dangerous. Gentlemen. Snake Eye stood offering his chair to Colonel Blackwood. Told you we had something interesting. Colonel Blackwood studied Sarah, his military bearing evident in every movement. She ain't much to look at, but her timing's suspicious, been in all the right places, asking all the wrong questions. The ghost moved closer. His eyes cold as a snake's, got the same build as that marshal's agent who caused trouble in Copper Creek. Sarah kept her breathing scared and shallow, while her mind cataloged weapons within reach, calculated angles to the door, and noted how Iron Jack's gun hand never strayed far from his holster. This is bigger than local law. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried the authority of command. We're building something here, transforming the territory into our own private kingdom. Can't afford loose ends. Our friend here, Snake Eye gestured to the ghost, has a particular talent for making problems disappear, asking questions that get answers. Sarah watched, the ghost circle behind her. His reputation for extracting information was well earned in certain circles. They said no one had ever kept secrets from him for long. Hold that thought. Snake Eye raised his hand as a commotion erupted from the main tunnel. Running feet approached, rapid Spanish mixed with English, as one of the sentries burst in. Senor Martinez, territorial marshals spotted 3 miles out, moving this way. Snake Eye cursed, but Sarah caught the quick glance between him and Colonel Blackwood. This wasn't panic. It was anticipation. Lock down the entrance, Blackwood ordered. Deploy the men as planned. They've walked into our trap. Sarah kept her expression terrified, but her mind was racing the marshal's approach. Wasn't a coincidence they were following her carefully laid trail. But the Shadow Riders had been expecting them, which meant someone had betrayed her operation. The question was, who? Get our guest secured. The ghost suggested, his cold eyes studying Sarah's reactions, somewhere nice and quiet, where we can have a proper conversation about who she really is and what she knows. Sarah felt rough hands lift her chair, carrying her deeper into the mine complex. Where the sounds of preparation echoed through stone corridors, she caught glimpses of men moving with military precision, positioning weapons and setting up defensive positions. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a fortress, one designed to trap law enforcement in a killing zone, and she was now at its heart. Sarah studied the holding cell's iron bars as the ghost's boots faded down the tunnel. Thick steel set deep into the living rock, an old maximum security section from the mine's glory days when silver shipments had needed serious protection. But now it held a different kind of precious cargo. Her, and what she suspected, were documents about the Shadow Riders' entire operation, stacked in crates along the back wall. The gang's own security measures about to give her exactly what she'd been searching for. Through the small ventilation shaft that connected to the main tunnel, she could hear organized chaos as men moved into defensive positions. Colonel Blackwood's military training evident in the precise deployment of forces. Get those wagons across the entrance. Iron Jack's voice carried clearly multiple boxes of ammunition to the upper positions. She noted the sound of crates being moved, heavy equipment being positioned. This was more than just preparation for a fight. They were setting a stage, using the marshal's approach as cover for something bigger. The lockpick sewn into her sleeve took only moments to retrieve, her bonds falling away, as she put her years of escape training to use, but Sarah didn't immediately break free. Instead, she moved silently to the crates. Her expert eye-catching details others might miss, shipping manifests bearing military stamps, requisition orders with Colonel Blackwood's forged signature, and most importantly, detailed maps. showing a network of supply lines stretching across 3 territories. The Shadow Riders hadn't just been smuggling weapons, they were building an army. Heavy boots approached her cell. Sarah quickly resumed her bound position as Snake Eye appeared with the Ghost, and Colonel Blackwood marshals are moving into position just like you said they would. Blackwood nodded satisfaction, evident in his bearing. Agent Rogers played his part perfectly, fed them exactly the information we wanted. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. Agent Rogers, the marshal's lead investigator, had been feeding her information for months now. She knew the betrayal ran deep, but this confirmed her worst fears about corruption within territorial law enforcement. Perfect chance to test our new merchandise. The Ghost smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Shipment from Mexico just came in specialty items guaranteed to deal with large groups of lawmen. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the implications. They weren't just planning to ambush the marshals. They were going to test new weapons, possibly the mysterious cargo that had been moving north from the border. The kind of weapons that could change the balance of power in the territory. Looks like our guest is paying real close attention. Snake Eye moved closer to the bars. Something about the way you take in details. Lady way too sharp for a simple rancher's wife. Sarah allowed a small smile to touch her lips. No point maintaining the charade when they'd clearly seen through part of her cover. You're right, she said softly. I'm not just a rancher's wife. The Ghost's hand moved to his gun, but Sarah continued. I'm someone who's been watching you, noticing how your operation's been changing, growing into something bigger than just another outlaw gang. Blackwood stepped forward, his military bearing more pronounced. Tell me exactly what you know about our operation and who you've told might make your last few hours more comfortable. Sarah met his gaze, years of facing down the worst the territory had to offer, evident in her steady voice. You're not just running guns anymore, you're building an infrastructure, recruiting men with military experience, establishing supply lines that could support an army. The Ghost's smile widened. Looks like the lady's been paying real close attention. Movement in the main tunnel drew their attention, new voices approaching boots with a distinctive rhythm that Sarah recognized even before Iron Jack appeared, face-tight with urgency. The Mexican shipment, he reported, 6 wagons, heavy guard, probably carrying. Sarah, finish the special weapons you've been bringing. North specialized armaments designed for military use, selling them to the highest bidder. Snake Eye's hand dropped to his gun. How exactly would you know about that? Because Sarah's voice remained calm. I've been tracking weapons like that for longer than you realize. Specialized weapons smuggled north. Tested on law enforcement. Then sold to whoever has the gold. Seen that pattern before during the border wars. Blackwood's expression shifted, recognition dawning. You're not just some spy. He studied her with new intensity. The way you talk about the weapons, the patterns you've recognized. Your Sarah felt the familiar weight of her hidden Colt still secure against her thigh. Sometimes the best way to discover an enemy's secrets was to let them think they had you trapped, while they revealed exactly what you came to learn. The Ghost moved suddenly, drawing his gun, but Sarah was already speaking. You're testing military-grade weapons? She continued, watching their reactions, using local law enforcement as experimental targets, then selling to the highest bidder. But the real question is, who's supplying the weapons, who's really behind all this? Blackwood's face hardened. That's enough. He turned to the Ghost. Make her talk. Find out everything she knows about the investigation, then make sure she disappears before those marshals get anywhere near here. Sarah watched them leave the cell, her mind already formulating plans, because while they thought they had her trapped in their fortress, she had them exactly where she wanted them. Sometimes the best way to uncover a conspiracy wasn't to attack it head-on. It was to let your enemies think they had the upper hand right up until the moment you showed them exactly who they were dealing with. Through the ventilation shaft, Sarah could hear the Mexican convoy approaching, the rumble of heavy wagons, the calls of drivers in Spanish. She counted 6 distinct vehicles, estimated the number of guards based on the hoofbeats that accompanied them. This wasn't just another weapons shipment. This was the evidence she needed to prove how far the corruption reached, right to the heart of territorial law enforcement and military command. If she could just survive long enough to expose it all. The Ghost returned alone, his steps echoing through the mine's stone corridors. Sarah knew that sound, had heard it in a dozen frontier towns before he'd earned his nickname for making problems disappear without a trace. But as he approached her cell, she noticed details. Others might miss the way his left hand stayed close to a hidden knife. The slight favor to his right leg, suggesting an old injury that she'd seen documented in wanted posters years ago. "You've caused quite a stir," he said softly. "Colonel Blackwood's real interested in exactly what you know about our operation." Sarah remained seated, her bonds already loosened, though she maintained the appearance of captivity. Through the ventilation shaft, she could hear the Mexican convoy being unloaded. Voices calling in Spanish as heavy crates were moved into position, the distinctive metallic sound confirming her suspicions about their contents. "These aren't just guns," she said, calmly watching. The ghost's reaction. "There's something new, something that could change everything." The ghost's smile was cold as winter steel. "Smart lady, too smart for your own good. You've been watching us longer than we thought, tracking patterns, seeing connections." The sound of boots interrupted them as Iron Jack appeared at the cell face, tight with urgency. "Wagons are unloaded, but we've got a problem. One of the marshals they captured claims he knows something about her." The ghost's expression shifted subtly, recognition dawning in his eyes. Sarah's mind raced, calculating possibilities. Had someone recognized her true identity? The legendary swift-hand McKenzie, whose reputation for lightning-fast draws and deadly accuracy had become almost mythical in certain circles. "Bring him here." The ghost ordered. "Let's see what he knows." The marshal they dragged in was young blood streaming from a split lip, but Sarah recognized him instantly. James Carter, the newest member of her investigative team, his presence confirming her fears about how deeply the betrayal within law enforcement ran. Carter's eyes widened slightly when he saw her, but years of undercover work helped him maintain his facade. "She's not who you think she is?" he gasped through bloodied lips. The ghost moved closer, suddenly interested hands clasped behind his back in a deceptively casual pose. "Tell me exactly who she is." Carter glanced at Sarah, then back to the ghost. "This is..." The ghost cut him off as realization struck his hand, moving to his gun with practiced speed. "You're one of hers, aren't you? Part of her network?" Sarah moved the moment she saw his fingers twitch, years of gunfighting experience taking over as she broke free from her loosened bonds, her hidden Colt clearing its holster with a speed that had earned her the name Swift Hand. Iron Jack's gun was still rising as her first shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him into the cell bars. The ghost's reflexes were legendary, his own weapon seemingly materializing in his hand, but Sarah was already moving, using the cell's iron bars for cover as she fired again. The sound deafening in the confined space, Carter dropped and rolled, coming up with Iron Jack's fallen gun. As chaos erupted in the tunnel outside, Spanish shouts mixing with English as the Mexican convoy guards responded to the gunfire. Sarah's third shot caught the ghost in his good leg, dropping him to the stone floor just as Colonel Blackwood's voice boomed through the tunnel seal. "The mine. Get those weapons secured." Snake Eye's orders carried over the chaos, followed by the sound of heavy equipment being moved. Sarah quickly retrieved the cell keys from the ghost, her mind already formulating plans. "They're not just securing the weapons," she said to Carter as she released him. "They're setting up for something bigger." Using the marshal's approach as cover, the young agent checked Iron Jack's gun. Finding it fully loaded, "They knew we were coming, didn't they?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Agent Rogers has been feeding them information, manipulating the investigation. He's working with Blackwood." A massive explosion rocked the mine complex, dust and debris raining down as charges collapsed the main entrance. Sarah recognized the pattern of the blast, precise, controlled military demolition. "They're not trapping us in." Carter realized they're securing their position, creating a kill zone for when the marshals try to breach. "Anyone else with you?" Sarah asked quickly. Reloading her Colt, 3 men still alive, pinned down near the entrance, but they've got some kind of new weapons. Sarah moved to the ventilation shaft, studying the complex's layout through the gaps. "The special shipment from Mexico." She explained, "Not just guns, something designed for military use." More explosions shook the mine, smaller charges precisely placed. Sarah's trained ear recognized the sequence. "They're collapsing specific tunnels," she explained, directing the marshals toward prepared positions where they can test their new weapons. Carter's face hardened like they did in Copper Creek, using law enforcement as test subjects for experimental armaments. "Exactly." Sarah checked the tunnel, finding it temporarily clear, but they made one mistake. The ghost's pained laugh drew their attention. "Still think you can stop this lady even if you get out of here. The marshals are walking into a trap, and Agent Rogers has made sure no one will believe Sarah's bullet caught him clean in the shoulder, silencing him." "You're right about one thing," she said calmly. "They did set a trap, but not the one they think." Her hands moved to her hair, pulling free. Specially designed pins that she'd carried ever since her days tracking the Bishop gang. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap, she explained to Carter, as she revealed the compact explosives hidden in the pins, is to trigger it exactly when and where you choose. Decades of working as a gunslinger had taught her that the most dangerous weapon wasn't always a gun. Sometimes it was knowing exactly how to turn your enemy's plans against them. Sarah's fingers moved with practiced precision as she positioned the explosive pins along the ventilation shaft's key structural points, her expert eye catching details that only someone intimately familiar with demolitions would notice. This whole section was a later addition. She explained to Carter, noting how the rock face had been carved differently than the original mine probably added when they started moving serious weapons through here. "They've modified. It created a perfect kill zone, but that means we can collapse it." Carter finished, understanding dawning on his face, watching her work with growing respect. "You've done this before." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she continued placing charges, remembering another time. Another gang who'd thought they had her trapped in the Banner Mine back in '78. The Bishop gang learned the hard way that sometimes the most effective way out isn't the obvious one. Through the shaft, they could hear Colonel Blackwood organizing his men, the precision of his orders confirming his military background. "Get those prototype weapons in position." Blackwood's voice carried clearly through the stone. "When those marshals breach, we'll show everyone what these babies can really do." Sarah's hands never stopped moving as she listened, cataloging details about troop positions and weapon placements. More Spanish voices echoed through the complex as the Mexican convoy guards integrated with Shadow Rider forces. Sarah counted at least 20 new voices, all with the disciplined responses of trained soldiers, not common bandits. "This isn't just a gang anymore," she told Carter. "It's an army." Heavy boots approached their position. Sarah quickly pulled Carter into an alcove, pressing close to the rough stone as Snake Eye and Iron Jack passed, leading a group of men carrying large wooden crates. The weapons inside clinked with a distinctive sound that Sarah recognized had heard it before during her investigation of the Territorial Armory robbery 6 months ago. "Military grade," she whispered, "prototypes that were supposedly destroyed in that fire." Agent Rogers reported. Carter's face hardened with understanding. That's why they wanted that fire investigated so quickly, covered up what was really stolen. Sarah waited until their footsteps faded before returning to her work. "How did you end up investigating them?" Carter asked, keeping watch while she carefully connected lengths of fuse salvaged from her hidden pins. "I was tracking weapons disappearing from military shipments," she explained, remembering the clues that had led her to Wilson's Creek, kept finding patterns, sophisticated operations too well organized for common outlaws. Started noticing military tactics, former soldiers showing up in outlaw gangs. Then I heard about the Shadow Riders, how they were different, disciplined. A distant explosion rocked the complex, followed by the sound of gunfire echoing through stone corridors. "The marshals are making their move," Carter observed. But Sarah heard something else in the chaos, the rhythmic movement of men taking prepared positions. "This is wrong," she said suddenly, checking her work one final time. "They're moving too precisely, like they've practiced this." Iron Jack's voice carried from somewhere above orders, crisp and professional. Groups 3 and 4 collapsed to secondary positions. 5 and 6 maintained distance. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the pattern. This isn't just an ambush. She realized this is a demonstration. They're not trying to escape. They want the marshals to breach, want to prove what their new weapons can do against organized law enforcement. Carter swore softly. "Testing grounds like Copper Creek, exactly." Sarah finished connecting the final fuse, but they made one critical mistake. "What's that?" "They assumed anyone they caught would try to escape through the main tunnels." Sarah smiled grimly. "Sometimes the best way to handle a trap is to trigger it unexpectedly. Let your enemies think they know exactly where you'll run, then show them how wrong they are. More gunfire erupted closer now, mixed with strange mechanical sounds that Sarah had never heard before the new weapons being deployed. She explained to Carter's questioning look. "We need to move before through the shaft," they heard Snake Eye's voice raised in excitement. "Showtime, boys. Let's show these marshals what real firepower looks like." Sarah struck a match, the small flame illuminating their position. "You better brace yourself, Agent Carter." She touched the flame to the fuse because this is about to get real interesting. The first explosion was perfectly targeted, taking out the modified support beams exactly as Sarah had calculated. The second and third followed in rapid succession, the shaft's structure collapsing in a controlled cascade that she'd learned to perfect during her years tracking outlaws through the territory's abandoned mines. The sound was deafening, stone and timber crashing down, as decades of mining expertise worked exactly as intended. Debris rained through the complex as confusion erupted above their position, voices shouting in English and Spanish as Sarah's demolition work disrupted carefully laid plans. "What did you do?" Carter asked. Coughing in the dust created a distraction. Sarah retrieved her Colt, checking the load, but more importantly, "I just cut off their access to half those weapon crates and divided their forces." The complex shook with secondary collapses as support structures failed in sequence exactly as she'd intended. Sometimes, she explained, the best way to fight isn't to confront your enemy's strength. It's to change the battlefield entirely. Make them fight on your terms through the settling dust. They could hear Colonel Blackwood shouting new orders, his careful planning disrupted by Sarah's unexpected demolition work. Now Sarah checked the tunnel ahead. "We move fast while they're scattered. Get to those prototype weapons before they can regroup, and more importantly, before Agent Rogers realizes his carefully laid trap just became a lot more complicated." Carter fell in behind her as they navigated the chaos, Sarah's intimate knowledge of mining operations, guiding them through gaps and shortcuts that Blackwood's men wouldn't expect, because while the Shadow Riders thought they'd created a perfect fortress, Sarah had spent years learning that sometimes the most effective path wasn't the obvious one. Sometimes victory came from understanding your terrain so completely that you could make it work against your enemies. Sarah moved silently through the chaos, her boots finding secure purchase on the debris-strewn floor, with a precision born from years of working in treacherous conditions through gaps in the collapsed tunnels. She caught glimpses of Shadow Riders scrambling to regroup their military discipline, disrupted by the unexpected destruction of their carefully prepared positions. "We've got 5 minutes," she whispered to Carter before they realized the collapse wasn't random. "Reorganize their forces," the young agent nodded, keeping close as they navigated the complex's newly transformed layout. The sound of the prototype weapons echoed strangely through the stone corridors, a mechanical whine unlike anything Sarah had heard before, followed by screams that made her blood run cold. "Those aren't normal guns?" Carter observed his face tight with concern as they pressed against a wall, letting a group of panicked guards rush past. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, remembering rumors she'd heard during her investigation of the armory robbery. Experimental weapons designed for crowd control, but these sound different, more lethal. A familiar voice carried through the settling dust, Colonel Blackwood issuing rapid orders. "Get those crates to the secondary position. Now don't let them near the prototypes." Sarah peered carefully around a corner, spotting movement near what had once been the mine's ore processing room. Now converted into a makeshift armory, through the haze she counted at least 10 men moving large wooden crates marked with military stamps and exactly the kind of warning symbols that confirmed her worst fears about what they contained. "They're splitting up," Carter whispered, "dividing the weapons, keeping them safe in case one cache is compromised." Sarah nodded, but her attention was caught by something else, the way certain guards moved with exaggerated care around specific crates. These aren't just guns, she realized studying their handling procedures. There's something new, something even their own men are afraid to touch. Movement above caught her attention, as Snake Eye appeared on a higher level. His voice, "Carrying clearly secure the main shaft we've got. Marshals trying to breach the west entrance." Sarah's hand tightened on her Colt as she recognized an opportunity in the chaos. They'll be focused on defending the breach. She explained to Carter, thinking through possibilities, won't expect anyone to move deeper into the complex, especially not toward the sound of those weapons testing. Carter checked Iron Jack's borrowed gun. "Then why are we?" because sometimes the best way to understand what you're fighting is to see it in action. Up-close movement in a side tunnel made them press into shadows as the ghost limped past, supported by 2 guards, his leg wound from Sarah's shot clearly paining him. "Did you see what those things did to the marshal's first wave?" The ghost's voice carried a note of awe Sarah had never heard in it before, cut through their cover like it wasn't even there. Colonel Blackwood was right. These will revolutionize warfare. Sarah's blood ran cold as implications clicked into place. "They're not just testing weapons," she whispered to Carter after the guards passed. "They're staging a demonstration proving what their prototypes can do against organized resistance." A massive explosion rocked the complex from the direction of the marshal's breach attempt. "Get those charges set." Another voice joined the chaos, Iron Jack directing men with the precision of a military operation when they breach again. "I want them walking into a proper welcome." Sarah studied the patterns of movement through the dust and debris, recognizing military strategies she'd seen before during her investigation of the armory theft they're creating layers. She explained to Carter. "Each wave of marshals will face something new, testing different weapons, different tactics, like Copper Creek." Carter's face hardened, remembering the reports of that massacre. But bigger, Sarah's trained eye caught details. Others might miss marking paths through the confusion that would lead them closer to the prototype weapons the Shadow Riders had prepared for scenarios involving frontal assault, infiltration from above, even underground approach. But they hadn't counted on someone who understood mining operations, who could read the story, told by support beams and ventilation shafts. Sometimes she explained guiding Carter through a maintenance tunnel that circumvented their defenses. The best way past a complex defense is to use paths your enemy doesn't even know exist. The mechanical whine grew louder as they moved deeper into the complex, punctuated by bursts of conventional gunfire and the occasional explosion from the marshal's breach attempts. Sarah counted sounds, cataloging different weapons, identifying positions, while her mind worked through implications of what she was hearing. "These aren't just advanced guns," she told Carter, noting how certain sounds made nearby support beams vibrate. "They're testing something that affects structures too. Maybe design too." She paused as new voices approached Rodriguez's status report, prototypes performing beyond expectations. A heavily accented voice responded. 3 marshals down, no survivors. Initial data suggests penetration exceeds projections by 40%. Sarah felt Carter tense beside her, but her hand on his arm kept him still as the voices passed. Sometimes, she whispered, the best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're alone. Remember, they still don't know who they're really dealing with through gaps in the collapsed tunnels. They could see Shadow Riders moving with renewed purpose. Their earlier confusion replaced by coordinated action. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried from above position. "Those specialty rounds exactly as planned. When they breach again, I want everything recorded." Sarah's mind raced ahead, understanding dawning. They're not just killing marshals, they're documenting it, gathering data about weapons, effectiveness, about tactical response patterns. Iron Jack's voice joined in, confirming her fears. "Cameras in place, sir. Every angle covered. This isn't a battle." Carter realized, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It's a sales pitch, exactly." Sarah led them toward a partially collapsed tunnel that would bypass the main defenses, because sometimes understanding your enemy's true purpose is more important than counting their numbers. They're proving their weapons work, demonstrating effectiveness against law enforcement to potential buyers, which means Sarah's expression hardened as she worked through implications. Somewhere in this complex is evidence of their whole operation. Shipping records, buyer contacts, everything needed to prove how deep this conspiracy really goes. And more importantly, who's really behind it all. Sarah and Carter crouched in the shadows of what had once been the mine's equipment storage area, now transformed into a makeshift command center. Through gaps in the debris, they could see Colonel Blackwood coordinating with Iron Jack as men positioned strange devices around the chamber. "Get those sensors calibrated properly," Blackwood ordered. "Need exact data on penetration rates and structural damage." Sarah's expert eye caught details. Others might miss the way certain equipment was positioned to record specific angles. The careful documentation of each weapons test. "They're not just selling the guns," she whispered to Carter. "They're selling proof of effectiveness." A group of Mexican guards passed their position carrying equipment that made Sarah's blood run cold. Specialized recording devices, military-grade targeting systems, and, most worryingly, what looked like medical monitoring equipment. "How deep does this go?" Carter asked quietly, watching as more guards moved crates marked with familiar military stamps deeper into the complex. Sarah's mind raced through implications connecting patterns she'd seen during months of investigation. Agent Rogers wasn't just feeding them information. She realized he was helping them select targets, choosing law enforcement units that would make the best test subjects. The mechanical whine of the prototype weapons grew louder, mixing with conventional gunfire, as another wave of marshals attempted to breach the complex's defenses. Through the chaos, Sarah caught fragments of conversation in Spanish and English that confirmed her worst fears. "Senor Blackwood." Rodriguez's voice carried clearly, "The buyers are impressed. Initial data shows casualty rates exceeding expectations." Sarah felt Carter tense beside her, but her hand on his arm kept him steady. Sometimes, she whispered, the best way to handle a situation like this isn't to rush in, it's to understand exactly what you're dealing with. Movement above caught their attention as Snake Eye appeared with the ghost, the latter still favoring his wounded leg, but his cold eyes missing nothing as they surveyed the operation. "Buyers want a full demonstration." The ghost reported something more dramatic than just picking off marshals one by one. Blackwood's smile was cruel as he studied a map of the complex. "Perhaps it's time to show them the full capabilities of our special project." Sarah's trained eye followed his gaze, noting how certain tunnels had been marked with precise measurements and load-bearing calculations. This isn't just about the weapons, she realized, studying the patterns. They're planning something bigger. A massive explosion rocked the complex from the direction of the Marshals' breach attempt, closer than previous blasts. Sarah counted secondary explosions, noting their precise timing and placement. "They're funneling them," she explained to Carter. Recognizing military tactics she'd seen before, using controlled demolitions to direct the Marshals exactly where they want them. The young agent's face hardened as understanding dawned. They're not just testing individual weapons, they're demonstrating a complete system. Sarah nodded, because sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one who knows exactly how to make you walk into their trap. Through the settling dust they watched as Shadow Riders moved with military precision, setting up equipment that Sarah recognized from her investigation of the armory theft. Specialized targeting systems designed to coordinate multiple weapons. "They're creating a killing field," she whispered to Carter, noting how each position supported the others, covering angles, providing interlocking fields of fire. But more importantly, they're recording everything, gathering data on how law enforcement responds to each new threat. Blackwood's voice carried clearly as he directed the operation when those marshals breach again. "I want everything documented, every reaction, every attempt at countermeasures." Sarah's hand moved to her hidden Colt as she processed implications. "We need to find their documentation." She told Carter, "Shipping manifests, buyer records, anything that proves how deep this conspiracy really goes." The young agent checked his borrowed gun. "What about the Marshals? They're walking into a trap." Sarah's expression hardened. Sometimes the best way to save your allies isn't to warn them, it's to disrupt the trap itself. Her eyes caught movement in a side tunnel as guards carried more recording equipment toward what appeared to be a central command post, and "I think I know exactly where they're keeping those records." The complex shook with another explosion. This one followed by shouts of triumph from the Shadow Riders' positions. "Got two more." Iron Jack's voice carried clearly. "Right where we wanted them. Perfect test subjects for the specialty rounds." Sarah felt Carter's grip tighten on his gun, but her hand on his arm kept him in position. "Wait," she whispered, watching, as the ghost limped toward the command post, followed by men carrying leather cases that she recognized, military document pouches designed for securing sensitive information. Sometimes the best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're winning. Let them get confident enough to reveal exactly what you need to see. Rodriguez appeared, coordinating with Blackwood as more guards moved equipment into position. "Buyers are asking about urban applications." He reported specifically how the weapons perform against hardened targets like police stations or government buildings. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the full scope of their operation. "They're not just selling weapons," she told Carter. They're selling a complete system for overwhelming law enforcement, demonstrating exactly how to neutralize any organized resistance. The young agent's face showed grim understanding, suddenly putting together pieces of a puzzle that had baffled investigators for months. Copper Creek wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trial-run movement in the main tunnel caught their attention as Snake Eye directed men carrying what looked like scientific equipment toward the command post. Get those sensors calibrated, he ordered. Need exact readings on structural damage and penetration rates through multiple layers. Sarah's expert eye caught details that confirmed her growing suspicions. They're not just interested in killing, she whispered to Carter. They want to prove their weapons can defeat any defense breach, any fortification by gathering precise data about effectiveness. Another explosion rocked the complex closer than before, following a pattern that Sarah recognized from military demolitions. They're almost ready, she warned Carter, preparing for their final demonstration. Sometimes the best way to stop a catastrophe isn't to prevent it from happening. It's to make sure it happens exactly where and when you choose, Sarah. And Carter moved silently through the transformed mine complex, navigating passages that had become increasingly treacherous since her demolition work had altered its structure. The sounds of battle echoed strangely through stone corridors, conventional gunfire mixing with the alien whine of prototype weapons and the controlled explosions that were systematically herding the marshals into prepared killing zones through gaps in collapsed support beams. They caught glimpses of shadow riders moving equipment with military precision, each position carefully chosen to gather maximum data about weapons effectiveness. The command post came into view, a fortified chamber that had once been the mine's assay office, now transformed into a high-tech operations center. Through the open door, Sarah counted at least 6 different recording stations, each dedicated to documenting specific aspects of the weapon's performance. They're treating this like a scientific study, she whispered to Carter, noting how guards carefully labeled and stored data from each engagement, recording casualty rates, penetration statistics, response times. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones with guns. She realized they're the ones with clipboards. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried from inside the command post, consulting with what sounded like multiple observers on radio channels. Buyers are particularly interested in structural damage, he reported. Need clear footage of penetration through reinforced positions. Sarah's trained eye caught details that confirmed her growing suspicions about the true nature of their operation. They're not just selling weapons, she told Carter, they're selling proof of concept. Demonstrating exactly how to overwhelm any organized resistance movement drew her attention to a side chamber where the ghost directed men carrying leather document cases. Get these loaded with the rest of the data. The ghost ordered, when this demonstration is over, we'll have proof that our system works against any opposition. Sarah studied the cases, recognizing military document pouches designed for securing sensitive information, shipping manifestos. She whispered to Carter. Contact lists. Everything needed to prove who's really behind this operation, who's been funding it. The young agent's face showed grim understanding as pieces of a larger puzzle fell into place. We get those documents, he said, we can expose the whole conspiracy. A massive explosion rocked the complex closer than previous blasts, following a pattern that Sarah recognized from military demolitions. They're nearly ready, she warned Carter, watching as shadow riders moved with increased purpose, setting up final positions for what she suspected would be their ultimate demonstration. Need 3 more minutes. Iron Jack's voice carried clearly. Then we show everyone what these babies can really do. Sarah's hand moved to her hidden Colt as she processed implications. They're not just testing individual weapons anymore. They're preparing to demonstrate their entire system. Movement above caught their attention as Snake Eye appeared, coordinating with Rodriguez as more guards positioned recording equipment. Get those specialty rounds in place, Snake Eye ordered, when those marshals breach again. I want everything documented. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized certain pieces of equipment. They're gathering proof, she told Carter, not just that their weapons work, but that they can defeat any defense, overcome any resistance by studying exactly how law enforcement responds. The young agent checked his borrowed gun, then adjusted his position to cover their approach to the command post. Sometimes, Sarah whispered, guiding them through shadows toward where the ghost supervised the document. Storage, the best way to handle a situation like this isn't to stop it from happening. It's to make sure it happens exactly where and when you choose. More explosions rocked the complex, each one precisely placed to drive the marshals deeper into prepared positions. Sarah counted secondary detonations, noting their timing, perfect military precision. She realized this isn't just an ambush. It's a choreographed demonstration proving their system works exactly as advertised. Through gaps in the debris they watched as Colonel Blackwood coordinated final preparations. The ghost still limping from Sarah's bullet, but his cold eyes missing nothing as guards moved sensitive equipment into protected positions. Buyers are standing by. Blackwood reported time to show them what they're really paying for. Sarah's expert eye caught details that confirmed her worst fears about their operation. Experimental targeting systems designed to coordinate multiple weapons, automated tracking devices that could predict and counter tactical responses, even specialized sensors for gathering data about structural damage. Carter tensed beside her as a group of guards passed their position carrying more recording equipment, but Sarah's hand on his arm kept him steady. "Wait." She whispered, "Sometimes the best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're in complete control. Let them get confident enough to reveal exactly what you need to see." Rodriguez appeared consulting with Blackwood as final adjustments were made to their surveillance system's initial data. Exceeding projections, he reported casualty rates and penetration statistics beyond expectations. Sarah processed implications as they moved closer to the command post, carefully timing their movements to avoid detection. "This isn't just about killing," she told Carter. "They're proving their system can defeat any opposition by studying exactly how law enforcement responds." Gathering precise data about tactics and countermeasures, the young agent's face showed understanding as pieces clicked into place. "That's why they chose the marshals," he said. "Best trained law enforcement in the territory." Exactly. Sarah led them toward where the ghost supervised document storage, because sometimes the best way to expose a conspiracy isn't to stop it. It's to gather enough evidence to bring down everyone involved. The complex shook with another explosion following the carefully planned sequence that was systematically eliminating marshal escape routes. Sarah recognized military demolition patterns in the timing. "They're almost ready," she warned Carter, preparing for their final demonstration. "Get those sensors calibrated." Iron Jack's voice carried clearly. "Need exact readings on penetration rates and structural damage." Sometimes Sarah whispered, as they positioned themselves near the command post. "The best way to stop a catastrophe isn't to prevent it from happening. It's to make sure it happens in a way that exposes everyone involved." Sarah watched from the shadows as Snake Eye and Colonel Blackwood made final preparations for their demonstration. The command post, now a hive of activity as guards positioned recording equipment and calibrated sensors to document their weapons' effectiveness through gaps in the debris. She studied the collection of military document pouches, noting how carefully the ghosts supervised their organization. These weren't just records. She realized they were proof of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial law enforcement and military command. The mechanical whine of prototype weapons grew louder, mixing with conventional gunfire and precisely timed explosions that were systematically eliminating marshal escape routes. Sarah's trained eye caught details in the chaos that others might miss, the way certain guards handled specific equipment with exaggerated care. The precise positioning of recording devices to capture maximum data. Even the careful documentation of each engagement. "They're not just killing," she whispered to Carter. "They're conducting research, gathering evidence about exactly how their weapons perform against trained law enforcement movement." Above drew their attention, as Iron Jack coordinated with Rodriguez, directing men as they set up what appeared to be specialized targeting systems. "Get those sensors aligned properly." Iron Jack ordered. "Need perfect data on penetration rates and response times." Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized military-grade equipment that had supposedly been destroyed in the armory fire. "They're creating a complete record," she told Carter. "Proof that their system works exactly as advertised, documenting every aspect of how it defeats organized resistance." Colonel Blackwood's voice carried clearly as he consulted with unseen observers on radio channels. Phase 1 complete. He reported initial data showing casualty rates exceeding projections by 60%. Sarah felt Carter tense beside her, but her hand on his arm kept him steady. Sometimes, she whispered, the best way to handle a situation like this isn't to rush in. It's to understand exactly what you're dealing with through the settling dust they watched as the ghost supervised the organization of leather document cases, each one carefully labeled and secured. Buyers are particularly interested in urban applications. Rodriguez reported specifically how the weapons perform against hardened targets. Sarah's expert eye caught details that confirmed her growing suspicions about the true scope of their operation. They're not just selling weapons, she told Carter. They're selling a complete system for overwhelming any organized resistance, proving it works by documenting exactly how law enforcement responds to each new threat. The young agent's face showed grim understanding as pieces of a larger puzzle fell into place. A massive explosion rocked the complex closer than previous blasts, following a pattern that Sarah recognized from military demolitions. They're almost ready, she warned Carter, watching as Shadow Riders moved with increased purpose, setting up final positions for what she suspected would be their ultimate demonstration. Get those specialty rounds in place. Snake Eye ordered when those marshals breach again. I want everything documented. Sarah processed implications as they moved closer to the command post. They're not just testing individual weapons anymore. They're preparing to prove their entire system works. The ghost appeared, coordinating with Blackwood as more guards positioned recording equipment. Get those cameras set, he ordered. Need clear footage of penetration through reinforced positions. Sarah studied the equipment, recognizing specialized sensors designed to measure structural damage and analyze tactical responses. They're gathering proof. She told Carter not just that their weapons work, but that they can defeat any defense by studying exactly how law enforcement reacts. The young agent checked his borrowed gun, then adjusted his position to cover their approach. Movement in the main tunnel caught their attention as guards carried more scientific equipment toward the command post. Calibrate those sensors. Snake Eye directed. Need exact readings on penetration rates and response times. Sarah's trained eye caught details that confirmed her worst fears about their operation. Experimental targeting systems designed to coordinate multiple weapons, automated tracking devices that could predict and counter tactical responses, even specialized sensors for gathering data about structural damage. Through the chaos they watched as Colonel Blackwood made final preparations, the ghost still favoring his wounded leg, but his cold eyes missing nothing as guards moved sensitive equipment into protected positions. Initiate final phase. Blackwood ordered. Time to show everyone what they're really paying for. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized certain pieces of equipment. They're not just documenting deaths, she whispered to Carter. They're proving their system can defeat any opposition by studying exactly how law enforcement responds, gathering precise data about tactics and countermeasures. The complex shook with another explosion, following the carefully planned sequence that was systematically eliminating martial escape routes. Sarah recognized military demolition patterns in the timing. 5 minutes, she warned Carter. They're preparing for their final demonstration. Get those sensors calibrated. Iron Jack's voice carried clearly. Need exact readings on penetration rates and structural damage, sometimes, Sarah whispered as they positioned themselves near the command post. The best way to stop a catastrophe isn't to prevent it. It's to make sure it happens in a way that exposes everyone involved. Rodriguez appeared, consulting with Blackwood as final adjustments were made to their surveillance systems. Buyers standing by, he reported, ready for full demonstration. Sarah's expert eye caught details that confirmed her suspicions about their operation. This isn't just about killing, she told Carter. They're proving their system can defeat any opposition by documenting exactly how law enforcement responds. Gathering precise data about tactics and countermeasures, the young agent's face showed understanding as pieces clicked into place. Through gaps in the debris, they watched as the ghost supervised the final organization of document cases, each one containing evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy: shipping manifests, contact lists, everything needed to prove who was really behind their operation. Sometimes, Sarah whispered, guiding them closer to the command post. The best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're in complete control. Let them get confident enough to reveal exactly what you need to see. The mechanical whine of prototype weapons reached a new intensity as Shadow Riders moved into final positions. Sarah counted sounds, cataloging different weapons, identifying locations, while her mind worked through implications of what she was hearing. These aren't just advanced guns, she told Carter, noting how certain sounds made nearby support beams vibrate. They're testing something that affects structures too designed to breach any defense by documenting exactly how different materials respond. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried command and satisfaction as he coordinated final preparations. Everything in position, he confirmed. Time to show our buyers exactly what they're paying for. Sarah's hand moved to her hidden Colt as she processed implications. This isn't just a demonstration, she realized, it's proof of concept, showing everyone that their system works exactly as advertised, by documenting precisely how it defeats trained law enforcement. Sometimes, she whispered to Carter as they prepared to move, the best way to stop a conspiracy isn't to prevent it from happening. It's to make sure it happens in a way that brings down everyone involved. The complex shook with what Sarah recognized as their final preparatory explosion, perfectly timed and placed to eliminate any remaining escape routes for the marshals. This is it, she warned Carter, watching as shadow riders moved with military precision into positions that would give them perfect angles for documenting their weapons' effectiveness. Get those cameras ready. The ghost ordered, need every detail recorded. Sarah's trained eye caught movement that confirmed her worst fears about their operation. They weren't just preparing to kill, they were getting ready to prove their entire system worked exactly as promised, by gathering precise data about exactly how it defeated organized resistance. The moment for action arrived with the precision of a well-timed clockwork, as Sarah caught the ghost's subtle signal to his men, indicating the final phase was about to begin. The command post hummed with activity, as guards positioned the last of their recording equipment, and shadow riders moved with military discipline into carefully prepared positions. Sarah's expert eye caught details in their movements that others might miss: the way certain men handled specific weapons with exaggerated care, the precise positioning of cameras to capture maximum data, even the careful documentation of each planned engagement. Through the chaos of final preparations, Sarah's trained hand never left her hidden Colt as she whispered instructions to Carter. They're about to demonstrate their entire system, she explained, watching as Colonel Blackwood coordinated with unseen observers on multiple radio channels. Need to time this perfectly, one chance to gather all the evidence we need. The young agent's face showed grim understanding as he checked his borrowed gun, positioning himself to cover their planned approach to the document storage area. Movement above drew their attention as Iron Jack appeared, with Rodriguez directing men as they calibrated specialized targeting systems. Get those sensors locked in, Iron Jack ordered. Need perfect data capture. When we initiate, Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized military-grade equipment that had supposedly been destroyed in the armory fire. They're creating a complete record, she told Carter. Proof that their system works exactly as advertised, documenting every aspect of how it defeats organized resistance. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried command and satisfaction as he consulted with what sounded like multiple observers on secure channels. Phase 1, data confirms success beyond projections. He reported casualty rates and penetration statistics exceeding expectations. Time to demonstrate full system capabilities. Sarah felt Carter tense beside her, but her hand on his arm kept him steady. Sometimes, she whispered, the best way to handle a situation like this isn't to rush in. It's to understand exactly when to strike. The ghost appeared, coordinating final preparations, his wounded leg still causing him to limp, but his cold eyes missing nothing, as guards positioned recording equipment. Get those cameras set, he ordered. Need clear footage of every engagement. Sarah studied their setup, recognizing specialized sensors designed to measure structural damage and analyze tactical responses. They're gathering proof, she told Carter. Not just that their weapons work, but that they can defeat any defense by studying exactly how law enforcement reacts. Through gaps in the debris, they watched as shadow riders moved with increased purpose, setting up final positions for what Sarah knew would be their ultimate demonstration. Get those specialty rounds in place, Snake Eye ordered. When this starts, I want everything documented. Sarah processed implications as they prepared to move. They're not just testing individual weapons anymore. They're about to prove their entire system works, and we're going to make sure that proof exposes everyone involved. The mechanical whine of prototype weapons reached a new intensity as guards carried more scientific equipment toward the command post. Calibrate those sensors. Snake Eye directed Need exact readings on penetration rates and response times. Sarah's trained eye caught details that confirmed her worst fears about their operation: experimental targeting systems designed to coordinate multiple weapons, automated tracking devices that could predict and counter tactical responses. Even specialized sensors for gathering data about structural damage movement in the main tunnel caught their attention as Colonel Blackwood made final preparations. The Ghost supervising as guards moved sensitive equipment and document cases into protected positions. "Initiate final sequence," Blackwood ordered. "Time to show everyone what they're really paying for." Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized certain pieces of equipment. "They're not just documenting deaths," she whispered to Carter. "They're proving their system can defeat any opposition by studying exactly how law enforcement responds." Through the chaos, they watched as the Ghost supervised the final organization of document cases, each one containing evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. Shipping manifests, contact lists, everything needed to prove who was really behind their operation. "Sometimes," Sarah whispered, guiding them closer to the command post, "the best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're in complete control. Let them get confident enough to reveal exactly what you need to see." Rodriguez appeared, consulting with Blackwood as final adjustments were made to their surveillance systems, buyers standing by. He reported ready for full demonstration. Sarah's expert eye caught details that confirmed her suspicions about their operation. "This isn't just about killing," she told Carter. "They're proving their system can defeat any opposition by documenting exactly how law enforcement responds, gathering precise data about tactics and countermeasures." The complex shook with what Sarah recognized as their final preparatory explosion, perfectly timed and placed to eliminate any remaining escape routes for the marshals. "This is it," she warned Carter, watching as Shadow Riders moved with military precision into positions that would give them perfect angles for documenting their weapons' effectiveness. "Get those cameras ready." The Ghost ordered Need, every detail recorded. A sudden commotion erupted from the direction of the marshal's last known position, followed by the distinctive sound of breaching charges. Sarah's trained ear recognized the pattern. "They're making their final push." She told Carter exactly as Blackwood planned. "Get ready. Because sometimes the best way to stop a catastrophe isn't to prevent it. It's to make sure it happens in a way that exposes everyone involved." Colonel Blackwood's voice carried command and satisfaction as he coordinated final preparations. "Everything in position," he confirmed. "Time to show our buyers exactly what they're paying for." Sarah's hand moved to her hidden Colt as she processed implications. This isn't just a demonstration. She realized it's proof of concept, showing everyone that their system works exactly as advertised by documenting precisely how it defeats trained law enforcement. Through the settling dust, they watched as the Ghost supervised the final organization of document cases, each one containing evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy. Shipping manifests, contact lists, everything needed to prove who was really behind their operation. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities as they prepared to move. Sometimes she whispered to Carter, "The best way to gather intelligence is to let your enemies think they're in complete control. Let them get confident enough to reveal exactly what you need to see." The mechanical whine of prototype weapons reached a new intensity as Shadow Riders moved into final positions. Sarah counted sounds, cataloging different weapons, identifying locations, while her mind worked through implications of what she was hearing. "These aren't just advanced guns," she told Carter, noting how certain sounds made nearby support beams vibrate. "They're testing something that affects structures too designed to breach any defense." Colonel Blackwood's voice carried clear authority as he issued final orders to his men. "Everything ready," he confirmed. "Time to demonstrate exactly what these weapons can do." Sarah's hand tightened on her Colt as she processed implications. This isn't just about killing. She realized it's about proving their entire system works exactly as promised, and we're going to make sure that proof brings down everyone involved. The complex shook with their final preparatory explosion perfectly timed and placed to eliminate any remaining escape routes for the marshals. "This is it," Sarah warned Carter, watching as Shadow Riders moved with military precision into positions that would give them perfect angles for documenting their weapons' effectiveness. "Get those cameras ready." The Ghost ordered Need, every detail recorded. Sarah's trained eye caught movement that confirmed her worst fears about their operation. They weren't just preparing to kill, they were getting ready to prove their entire system worked exactly as promised. Sarah's fingers brushed against her hidden Colt as she whispered final instructions to Carter, about to turn their own careful planning against them, because sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy isn't to prevent their plans. It's to make sure those plans expose exactly what you need them to show. And Sarah, swift-hand McKenzie, had learned through years of experience that the most effective way to bring down a conspiracy wasn't to stop it, but to make sure it happened in a way that revealed everyone involved. The mechanical whine of prototype weapons reached its peak as Sarah gave Carter the signal they'd been waiting for through the chaos of final preparations. She caught every detail that others might miss, the way Colonel Blackwood positioned his men for maximum effect, how the Ghost supervised the careful documentation of their demonstration, and most importantly, how everyone's attention focused on their sophisticated targeting systems and recording equipment perfect. Sarah thought letting her rancher's wife mask slip away as years of gunfighting experience took over. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them think they know exactly what to expect. The command post hummed with activity as Shadow Riders moved with military precision into their final positions, all focused on the approaching sounds of martial breach attempts. Snake Eye's voice carried clear authority. "Get those cameras ready," he ordered, time to show everyone what real firepower looks like. Sarah's hand moved to her hidden Colt as she whispered final instructions to Carter. "When this starts, don't focus on the weapons. Focus on the evidence, because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the gun. It's the proof of who's really behind it all." Colonel Blackwood coordinated with his observers on multiple radio channels. Initial penetration test, commencing in 30 seconds. He reported all recording systems active. Sarah counted guards, noting positions, weaknesses, and most importantly, which ones carried those crucial document cases. The Ghost had so carefully organized buyers standing by for full demonstration. Blackwood continued unaware that his perfect system was about to become evidence against everyone involved. Sarah smiled softly. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to let your enemies think they're the ones in control. A massive explosion rocked the complex, marking the Marshal's final breach attempt. Blackwood's voice carried satisfaction. Perfect timing, implement defense pattern. Alpha Sarah's trained eye caught the subtle shift in Shadow Rider positions as they prepared to demonstrate their weapons' effectiveness. "Now," she whispered to Carter, "because sometimes the most effective moment to strike isn't when your enemy is weak. It's when they're at their most confident, when they think victory is already theirs." Sarah moved with the speed that had earned her the name Swift Hand, her hidden Colt clearing its holster before the Ghost could even register the threat. The first shot caught him clean in the shoulder, spinning him away from the document cases as chaos erupted in the command post through the confusion. Sarah's voice carried clear authority that all of them recognized Federal Marshal Sarah Swift-Hand McKenzie. Time to show everyone what's really being demonstrated here. The shock of recognition rippled through the Shadow Riders as Sarah's next shots disabled key targeting systems with surgical precision. Her reputation wasn't just about speed. It was about accuracy, about understanding exactly where to strike to have maximum effect. Impossible Snake Eye's gun was still rising as Sarah's third shot knocked it from his hand. "You're the rancher's wife." Carter moved with trained efficiency, securing document cases as Sarah maintained cover. "Sometimes," she said calmly, "the best way to get evidence isn't to fight your way to it. It's to let your enemies gather it all in one place." Colonel Blackwood's military training showed as he quickly adapted, shouting new orders to his men. But Sarah had already anticipated his response. Her next shots targeting carefully chosen support beams that sent recording equipment crashing down, creating chaos in precisely planned positions, because while they'd been focused on documenting their weapons' effectiveness, she'd been studying structural weaknesses. That's the end of the story. Thank you for staying with us.